Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're looking at a story that honestly feels less like ancient history and way more like the plot of a massive, high-stakes Hollywood heist. We're talking about the sudden, literally overnight collapse of an empire that absolutely everyone believed was impenetrable. A city so grand, it was considered entirely untouchable. And yet, in a single night, it just stopped being an empire. This is the fall of Babylon.
Because it really is the ultimate puzzle, right? How exactly do you conquer a city that cannot be breached? For centuries, no army had ever taken Babylon by force. The very idea of it falling to a siege was considered laughable. So how did a civilization at the absolute peak of its defensive power vanish into enemy hands before the sun even came up? Well, it's a completely fascinating historical mystery, and today we are going to break down exactly how it happened.
Part 1. The Untouchable City. So to really wrap our heads around this collapse, we first have to grasp the sheer, unbelievable scale of the target. For centuries, Babylon was the absolute symbol of dominance in the ancient world. We're talking massive temples, bustling streets, immense wealth. But there was this really stark contrast between what Babylon looked like on the outside and what was actually happening on the inside. Externally, you have their legendary defenses. Walls, so massive, ancient historians claimed you could literally race chariots on top of them, and raging rivers acting as natural moats. But internally, the empire was quietly fracturing. You had King Nabonidus ruling from afar, you had furious priests, and a very uneasy populace. It looked completely impenetrable on the outside, but man, it was incredibly brittle on the inside.
Part 2. A different kind of conqueror. Now, while Babylon is dealing with all this hidden internal rot, there's this absolutely unstoppable threat forming just beyond its borders: the Persians, led by Cyrus the Great. And Cyrus? He wasn't your typical ancient warlord looking to just burn everything to the ground. His method was entirely different. He didn't rush into war. He studied it. Rather than destroying the places he conquered, like Lydia and the Median lands, he patiently absorbed them. He was a strategic mastermind playing the long game here, and his eyes were locked dead on Babylon.
So what does a brilliant tactician actually do when faced with walls you physically cannot knock down and a city protected by deep, raging rivers? Well, Cyrus did something completely unexpected. He didn't launch a massive attack. He didn't order his men to charge the walls. He simply set up camp outside the city and he waited. Now, you'd think having the entire Persian army literally camped on your doorstep would cause a massive panic, right? But inside the walls, Babylon's confidence morphed into this blinding, almost comical arrogance, because they believed their city could never fall. Daily life just carried on. Festivals continued, trade flourished. Unbelievably, they even left some of the city gates wide open just to show how totally unbothered they were. They literally thought the Persians were just out there wasting their time.
Part 3. Breaching the river.
But outside those walls, Cyrus wasn't just, sitting on his hands. Persian engineers were quietly prepping a master plan. According to ancient accounts, particularly from the historian Herodotus, here was the step-by-step heist. Step 1, wait for a massive citywide festival to completely distract the population. Step 2, take the mighty Euphrates River, which flowed directly through the center of Babylon, and physically divert it far upstream. Step 3, as the water level dropped in the dead of night, march the soldiers right into the muddy, shallow riverbed. And Step 4, simply walk into the city, bypassing those impenetrable walls by going right underneath them. It's an absolute masterclass in engineering. Now, I should point out that historians are actually kind of divided on this exact sequence of events. On one hand, we have Herodotus's thrilling account of this dramatic river engineering and infiltration. But on the other hand, some ancient Babylonian records don't mention this massive engineering feat at all. Instead, modern historians debate whether this was a brilliant river infiltration or if that internal fragility we talked about earlier simply led to a quiet internal surrender by a populace that was just completely over their rulers. As an explainer of the source material, we aren't here to pick a side on this. We're just here to show you that history is often this totally fascinating puzzle of competing narratives. But here's the thing, whatever the method actually was, the final outcome is absolutely not up for debate. Regardless of whether it was a daring walk through a drained riverbed or a coordinated surrender from within, the breach was terrifyingly quiet. The Persian soldiers entered the city so silently that the guards were completely taken by surprise. They were overwhelmed before a single alarm could even spread through the streets.
Part 4. Writing on the wall.
So while the city's outer defenses are being compromised in absolute dead silence, there's this very different, highly legendary scene playing out deep inside the royal palace. Belshazzar was throwing a massive feast, and according to later biblical tradition, right in the middle of this huge banquet, mysterious writings suddenly appeared on the palace wall. It was a terrifying final decree, signaling the absolute end of Babylonian rule.
Historians today actually look at this famous writing on the wall account in a couple of different ways. Some scholars view it as symbolic storytelling, like a dramatic way to communicate divine judgment on a highly arrogant empire. But others believe it might actually be a preserved cultural memory of the very real, very sudden chaos that erupted in the palace as the Persians unexpectedly breached the perimeter. Either way you slice it, the underlying message was crystal clear. Babylon's time was officially up.
Part 5. The Cost of Hubris. By the time the sun came up the very next morning, the untouchable city had completely fallen. But the real twist here is how the new master treated his freshly conquered prize. Because Cyrus didn't act like a traditional conqueror. He acted like a liberator. He allowed religious freedom, he deeply respected local customs rather than trying to wipe them out, and he even permitted exiled peoples, including the Jewish people, to finally return to their homelands. By acting as a liberator, he didn't just conquer Babylon, he seamlessly absorbed it, instantly stabilizing this massive new empire.
And just like that, an empire that everyone thought would literally last forever vanished. It became another. And the craziest part? The fall was not loud. There was no dramatic collapsing of walls. There were no massive flaming sieges. It was quiet. It was highly strategic. It was almost completely invisible to the people actually living through it. And honestly, that is exactly what makes the fall of Babylon so captivating, and maybe even a little bit terrifying. Babylon didn't lose because its military was weak. It didn't lose because its walls weren't high enough. It lost because it genuinely believed it could not lose. In the end, its greatest defense was not its physical walls. It was its confidence. Their complete and utter certainty in their own invincibility became the very door through which history changed forever. And it leaves us with this really lingering thought to consider, whether we're looking at ancient empires, modern businesses, or honestly even our own lives. When exactly does confidence start being a strength and start becoming a fatal flaw? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the history you think you know.